She was paid to abort pregnancy by her billionaire CEO. 4 years later, he sees her with twin girls. We're closed. Vivian, please, I just saw you through the window. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That I kept them? That your money wasn't enough to erase what you threw away? Those are my daughters, aren't they? The twins. I can see it in their eyes. You can say it, Monsieur Cross. They're your daughters too. Though you surrendered that right 4 years ago when you handed me a check for $200,000 and told me to make the problem disappear. I was wrong. God, Vivian, I was so wrong. You were wrong. You looked at me, pregnant with your children, and called them a distraction. You paid me to abort them like they were some business liability you needed to eliminate from your quarterly report. And now you stand here in your $1,000 suit, soaking wet in the rain, telling me you were wrong. What are their names? You don't get to know their names. Please. Margot and Isabel. Margot is older by 3 minutes. They're 4 years old. 4 years you missed because you were too much of a coward to be a father. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Your apologies are 4 years too late. That conversation happened on a rainy October evening outside a small bakery in Brooklyn. But to understand how a billionaire pharmaceutical CEO ended up begging for forgiveness in the rain, we need to go back. Back to the moment when Damien Cross made the worst decision of his life. Back to the morning when the woman he loved told him she was pregnant, and he responded by calling his lawyer. This is a story about choices and consequences. About the price we pay when we value control over connection. About whether some mistakes can ever truly be forgiven. And about a man who had to lose everything to understand what actually mattered. Damien Cross had learned to measure worth in numbers, stock valuations, profit margins, quarterly projections. At 34, he commanded a pharmaceutical empire valued at $8 billion. He lived in a glass tower that touched the clouds on the Upper East Side. He wore watches that cost more than most people's homes. His office overlooked Central Park, and from his desk, he could see the entire city spread beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered through ruthless intelligence and unwavering focus. His father had built Cross Pharmaceuticals from nothing, and Damien had transformed it into a giant. He'd done it by following one simple rule his father had drilled into him since childhood. Never let anything compromise your control. Not love, not family, not sentiment. Control is everything. Emotion is weakness. Attachment is liability. For 34 years, that philosophy had served him well, until the day it destroyed him. But on this particular October evening, standing in the rain outside a bakery called Sweet Marguerite, watching through the steamed window as a woman with auburn hair braided a little girl's ponytail while another identical child licked frosting from her fingers, Damien realized he had miscalculated the most important equation of his life. 4 years ago, he had written a check for $200,000 and called it a solution. Now, staring at those twin girls with his mother's distinctive dimples and his own stubborn chin, he understood he had purchased his own damnation. The rain soaked through his $1,000 suit, but Damien couldn't move. His driver was waiting in the car around the corner. He'd only stopped because he'd seen the bakery's name, Sweet Marguerite. His mother's name had been Marguerite. He'd glanced through the window out of idle curiosity, and then his entire world had stopped. One of the twins, the one getting her hair braided, suddenly looked toward the window. Their eyes met, and Damien's breath caught in his throat. Hazel eyes flecked with gold, exactly like his sister's, exactly like his late mother's. The little girl tilted her head curiously, studying him with an intensity that seemed far too knowing for someone so young. Then she tugged on the woman's sleeve, pointing. Vivienne Laurent turned, and time collapsed. She was thinner than he remembered. Her once soft features were now carved with a sharpness that spoke of hardship survived. Her auburn hair, which used to fall in loose waves past her shoulders, was pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a simple white t-shirt dusted with flour and jeans that had seen better days. But her eyes, those storm gray eyes that had once looked at him with such tenderness, such love, such hope, now they held only ice. Damien watched as her face went through a series of expressions: shock, recognition, then something that looked like fear before it hardened into fury. She said something to the children, her lips moving rapidly. Both little girls looked at him again, their small faces curious. Then Vivian stood slowly, her movements deliberate, and walked to the door. The bell above it chimed as she opened it just wide enough to stand in the gap. The warm smell of butter and sugar wafted out, mixing with the cold rain. She didn't step outside. She just stood there, one hand on the door, her body blocking the entrance like a guardian protecting something precious. "We're closed," she said. Her French accent was thicker than he remembered, each word carefully enunciated like she was using them as weapons. "Vivian, we are closed." She began to shut the door, but Damien's hand caught it. He didn't push, didn't try to force his way in. He just held it there, his palm against the wood, feeling the resistance of her pushing from the other side. "Please, I saw you through the window. I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "That I kept them? That your money wasn't enough to erase what you threw away?" Behind her, the two little girls had climbed down from their chairs and were walking closer, their small faces peering around their mother's legs. They couldn't have been more than 4 years old. 4 years since that terrible morning in his office when Vivian had stood before his desk, hands trembling as she told him she was pregnant, and he had responded by calling his lawyer. "I need to explain. You explained perfectly 4 years ago, Monsieur Cross, with a check and a legal document that made me sign away any claim to you or your fortune." Vivian's jaw tightened. "I signed it, I took your money, and then I made my own choice. Can we talk? Please." "Not here, not in front of." "My daughters?" Vivian's eyes flashed. "You can say it. They're your daughters too, though you surrendered that right." One of the twins appeared at Vivian's side, wrapping small arms around her mother's leg. The little girl looked up at Damien with those hazel eyes, and he felt something crack in his chest. "Maman, qui est ce?" Her voice was small, uncertain, speaking in French. Vivian's expression softened instantly as she switched to French, stroking the child's dark curls. "Personne, ma chérie. Just someone who was leaving." Her hand moved to close the door again, but Damien couldn't let her. Not yet. Not when he'd just found what he'd spent 4 years trying to forget. "What are their names?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Vivian hesitated. He could see the war raging behind her eyes, pride versus something else. Anger versus perhaps the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, these girls deserved to know their father. Or maybe she just wanted him to know exactly what he'd thrown away. She lifted her chin defiantly. "Margot and Isabelle." "Margot is older by 3 minutes. French names," Damien whispered. The words felt sacred in his mouth. His daughters had names. They were real. They were here. They were. "They are French," Vivian replied coldly. "I took them to Paris after they were born. We only returned 6 months ago when my mother became ill, so they had been an ocean away. Perhaps that's why his private investigators had never found them. Not that he'd hired any. He'd been too much of a coward to even look. He'd taken Viviana's disappearance as confirmation that she'd done what he'd paid her to do, and he'd buried himself in work, in acquisitions, in anything that would keep him from thinking about that morning in his office." The second twin joined her sister, and Damien's heart cracked wider seeing them together. Margot had Vivian's delicate features, but his dark hair, almost black, falling in soft waves around her face. Isabelle had his mother's curls, wild and untamed, but Vivian's gray eyes that seemed to see right through him. They were perfect. They were strangers. They were his. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate, like bringing a Band-Aid to a massacre. "I'm so sorry, Vivian. Your apologies are 4 years too late." She began closing the door again, and this time Damien let his hand fall away. "Please don't come back here. Wait." But the door clicked shut, and he heard the lock turn with a finality that echoed in his bones. Damien stood in the rain, watching as Vivian gathered both girls into her arms. She lifted them easily, one on each hip, their small faces pressed against her shoulders. She didn't look back at him. She simply carried them toward the back of the bakery, disappearing through a doorway, and Damien was left staring at his own reflection in the glass, a ghost of a man who had everything and nothing at all. The rain fell harder. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his assistant wondering where he was. He had a dinner meeting in an hour with investors from Tokyo, a deal worth $300 million. He should go. He should get in his car and return to his life, to his empire, to the world where he knew the rules and controlled all the variables. But Damien couldn't move. His feet had grown roots in the Brooklyn sidewalk. His eyes stayed fixed on that doorway where Vivian had disappeared with their daughters, with Margot and Isabel, with the family he'd paid to destroy, a family that had survived despite him. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, Damien sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by the trappings of his success, and finally allowed himself to remember. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed him the glittering city below. 47 floors up, the world looked small and manageable. From up here, he could pretend he was in control. But tonight, the illusion shattered. Vivian had been the head pastry chef at Le Bernardin when they met. It was at a charity gala 3 years ago, one of those insufferable events where Manhattan's elite gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves. Damien had attended out of obligation. His company was sponsoring the event, something about funding culinary scholarships for underprivileged youth. He'd planned to make an appearance, give a brief speech, and leave. Then he'd seen the dessert table. In the center was a sculpture that didn't look like food at all. It looked like art. A phoenix rising from flames, created entirely from spun sugar and dark chocolate. The flames were translucent amber sugar, backlit so they seemed to actually glow. The phoenix itself was dark chocolate, its wings spread wide, each feather individually crafted with such detail that Damien had stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Who made this?" he'd asked the event coordinator. "Vivienne Laurent. She's Le Bernardin's pastry chef. She donated it for the auction." Damien had bid $30,000 for it, not because he wanted the dessert, but because he wanted to meet the artist who could create something so beautiful, who could take sugar and chocolate and transform them into something that made him feel. He couldn't remember the last time anything had made him feel. She'd approached him after the auction, slightly flustered, her cheeks flushed. "Monsieur Cross? I don't know what to say. $30,000 for a dessert sculpture is worth every penny," Damien had finished. "It's extraordinary. You're extraordinarily talented." She'd laughed, and the sound had done something strange to his chest. "It's just sugar and chocolate." "No," he'd said, studying her face. "It's not. It's a phoenix. It's rebirth. It's hope. That's not just sugar and chocolate. That's vision." And Vivian had looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, really looked at him, and said, "Most people just see dessert. I'm not most people." "No," she'd agreed, a small smile playing at her lips. "I don't think you are." Their first conversation had lasted 4 hours. They'd left the gala together, walked through Central Park even though it was nearly midnight, and talked about everything. Her childhood in Lyon, his complicated relationship with his father, her dreams of opening her own patisserie, his admission that he'd built an empire but didn't know what it was for. She'd made him laugh. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. Their first kiss happened on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise after they'd talked through the entire night. The city was waking up around them, and Vivian had been telling him about her grandmother's bakery in France. And the way her eyes lit up when she talked about it made Damien want to give her the world. So he'd kissed her. Right there on the bridge with the East River below them and the morning light turning everything gold. She'd kissed him back, and Damien had felt something he'd never felt before, like coming home, like finding something he hadn't known he was looking for. Their first "I love you" came 3 months later. They were in his penthouse, tangled in his sheets as dawn broke over the city. She'd said it in French first, "Je t'aime," then in English, her accent wrapping around the words like a gift. "I love you, Damien Cross. I love you even though you're impossible and stubborn and you work too much." He'd said it back and meant it. "I love you, Vivienne Laurent. I love you even though you leave flour everywhere and you sing off key in the shower and you've completely destroyed my carefully organized life." She'd laughed and kissed him, and Damien had thought, This is what I've been missing. This is what matters." She moved into his penthouse after 6 months. He'd never lived with anyone before, never wanted to share his carefully controlled space. His penthouse was a showpiece, all glass and steel and marble, Cold, perfect, untouchable, like him. But Vivian brought warmth into his glass tower. She brought flowers for the table, fresh ones every week from the farmer's market. She brought music, playing French jazz while she experimented with recipes in his state-of-the-art kitchen that he'd never actually used. She brought laughter, echoing off the cold marble floors, filling spaces he hadn't known were empty. She brought life. For 18 months, Damien had been happy in a way he'd never known was possible. He'd started leaving work earlier to have dinner with her. He'd taken weekends off, something he'd never done. They'd explored the city together. She'd shown him her favorite bakeries, little hole-in-the-wall places in Queens and Brooklyn where old women made bread the way their grandmothers had taught them. He'd taken her to the opera, to gallery openings, to restaurants where reservations took months. But more than that, they'd just been together. Cooking breakfast on Sunday mornings, reading in comfortable silence, talking about their days, building something that felt real and solid and permanent. And then she told him she was pregnant. Damien could still see her face that morning. It was a Tuesday in March, almost exactly 4 years ago. He'd been getting ready for work, putting on his cufflinks, mentally preparing for a board meeting. Vivian had appeared in the bathroom doorway, still in her pajamas, holding something small in her hand. "Damien," she'd said softly, "we need to talk." He'd glanced at her reflection in the mirror. "Can it wait? I have a meeting at 8. "No." She'd stepped closer, and he'd seen that her hands were trembling. "I don't think it can wait." He'd turned then, really looking at her, and seen the nervousness in her eyes, the hope, the fear. "What is it?" She'd held out her hand, showing him what she was holding. A pregnancy test, with 2 pink lines. "I'm pregnant," she'd whispered. And Damien's entire world had tilted. His first thought hadn't been joy. It hadn't been excitement. It had been panic. Pure, cold panic. Because his company was in the middle of a hostile takeover attempt, because his board was questioning his leadership after a drug trial had failed, because his father's voice was suddenly loud in his head, saying what he'd always said: "Never let anything compromise your control. Not love, not family, not sentiment. Control is everything. A baby would compromise everything." So instead of pulling Vivian into his arms, instead of celebrating, instead of being the man she needed him to be, Damien had gone cold. He'd felt his face close off, felt himself retreating into the armor he wore in boardrooms. "This isn't a good time," he'd said. Vivian had blinked. "What?" "The company is vulnerable right now. The takeover attempt, the board pressure. I can't afford distractions." "Distractions?" She'd whispered the word like it was in a foreign language she didn't understand. "You know what I mean. We can revisit this in a few years when things are stable." "Revisit this?" Her voice had risen, shock giving way to disbelief. "Damien, I'm pregnant now. There is no revisiting this." And then he'd said the words that would haunt him forever, the words that would cost him everything. "There are options, Vivian. I'll take care of everything, financially, I mean. You won't have to worry about anything." The silence that followed had been deafening. Vivian had stared at him as if seeing a stranger, and perhaps she was. Perhaps the man she'd loved had never really existed. Perhaps he'd just been playing a role, pretending to be human, and now his true nature was showing. "You want me to terminate the pregnancy?" she'd said flatly. "I'm saying we have choices." "No." She'd backed away from him, the pregnancy test falling from her hand to clatter on the marble floor. "You have choices. You've always had choices. But you're asking me to choose between you and our child." "Vivian, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Her voice had cracked. "You're asking me to abort our baby because it's inconvenient for your quarterly earnings, and you want me to be reasonable?" "That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said." She'd grabbed her purse from the bedroom, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "I thought I knew you. I thought... God, I was so stupid." "Vivian, wait." "No." She'd turned to face him, and there were tears streaming down her face. "I won't wait. I won't stand here and let you treat our child like a problem to be solved. Like a line item to be eliminated from your budget. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about." She'd walked toward the door, and Damien had just stood there, frozen. "Get out. This is my apartment." Then I'll leave." She'd grabbed her coat from the closet, stuffing her feet into shoes. "I'll leave, and you can have your empire and your control and your perfect, undistracted life." He should have stopped her, should have run after her, fallen to his knees, begged forgiveness, should have told her he was scared, that he didn't know how to be a father, that his own father had been cold and distant, and he was terrified of becoming that. Should have told her that she was more important than any company, any deal, any amount of money. But Damien had said nothing. He'd just watched her leave, the door slamming behind her with a finality that should have warned him. And then, because he was a coward, because he was his father's son, because he valued control over everything else, he'd called his lawyer. "Make this go away," he'd said, "whatever it costs." The legal documents had arrived at Vivian's sister's apartment 2 days later. Damien had found the address through his assistant. The papers were straightforward, clinical. In exchange for $200,000, Vivian Laurent would terminate the pregnancy and sign away any future claims against Damien Cross or his estate. She would sign a non-disclosure agreement. She would, in essence, erase herself and their child from his life. His lawyer had called it clean and simple. Vivian had signed the papers, she'd taken the check, and she'd disappeared. Damien had told himself he'd done the right thing. The company had survived the takeover attempt. He'd restructured the board. He'd launched 2 new drugs that had been wildly successful. His net worth had doubled. He'd won. Except now, sitting in his empty penthouse at 3 a.m, staring at the city that had once seemed like his kingdom, Damien finally admitted the truth. He'd lost everything that mattered. He'd traded a family for a fortune. He'd chosen control over connection. And for 4 years, he'd been living in a mausoleum of his own making, surrounded by wealth and success, and absolutely nothing that made him feel alive. Until tonight. Until he'd seen those 2 little girls through a bakery window. Until he'd looked into their eyes and seen his mother, his sister, himself. Until he'd understood that Vivian hadn't done what he'd paid her to do. She'd kept their children. She'd raised them alone. She'd survived despite him, and he'd missed 4 years of their lives, 4 years of first words and first steps, 4 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees, 4 years of watching them grow, of being their father, of being part of something bigger than himself, 4 years he could never get back. Damien put his head in his hands and finally let himself cry. Great shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in his chest. He cried for the man he'd been, for the coward who'd written a check instead of stepping up, for the fool who'd thought money could solve problems of the heart, for the son who'd listened to his father's poison and let it destroy the best thing that had ever happened to him. And when the tears finally stopped, when the sun was starting to rise over the city, Damien made a decision. He couldn't change the past, couldn't take back the check or the legal documents or the words that had driven Vivian away. But he could try. He could show up. He could fight for a chance to know his daughters, to be part of their lives, to maybe somehow earn back even a fraction of what he'd thrown away. It wouldn't be easy. Vivian had every right to hate him, every right to keep him away. But Damien had built an $8 billion empire through persistence and determination. Surely he could apply those same qualities to something that actually mattered. He returned to the bakery the next morning. Sweet Marguerite opened at 7, and Damien was there at 6:55, standing outside the door with 2 cups of coffee. One black, the way he took it, one with too much sugar and cream, the way Vivian used to drink it. He didn't know if she still took it that way, but it felt like a peace offering. She arrived at 7 exactly, holding both girls by the hand. They were dressed for preschool, little backpacks on their shoulders, chattering to each other in rapid French. Vivian stopped when she saw him, her face closing off. "I told you not to come back." "I know, but I'm here anyway." He held out the coffee. "Peace offering? I don't want your coffee." "Then pour it out." "But please, just give me 5 minutes." Vivian looked at the girls, then back at him. Her jaw was tight, her eyes hard. "Go inside," she told the girls in French. "Put your backpacks in the office. I'll be right there." The twins looked at Damien curiously as they passed. Margot gave him a small, shy smile. Isabel stared at him with those gray eyes that were so like her mother's, assessing him with a seriousness that seemed far too old for her age. Then they disappeared into the bakery. and Vivian turned back to him. 5 minutes, she said. That's all you get. Thank you. Damien handed her the coffee and she took it automatically before seeming to realize what she'd done. She looked down at it and something flickered across her face. You remembered how I take my coffee. Too much sugar, too much cream. You used to say it was dessert in a cup. That was a long time ago. I know. Damien took a breath. Vivian, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm asking anyway. Please, let me know them. Let me be part of their lives. Why? She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, and he could see the pain there, barely hidden beneath the anger. Why now, Damien? You had 4 years to find us. 4 years to wonder if I'd done what you paid me to do. 4 years to care. Why do you suddenly want to be a father now? Because I saw them, he said honestly. Because I looked through that window and saw what I'd thrown away and it broke something in me. Because I've spent 4 years lying to myself, telling myself I made the right choice. And in one moment, I realized I'd made the worst mistake of my life. So you saw them and felt guilty. That's not a reason to disrupt their lives. You're right, it's not. But Vivian, they deserve to know their father, and I. He stopped, struggling for words. I want to know them. I want to be there for them. I want to try to be the man I should have been 4 years ago. You can't just decide to be a father because it's convenient now. I know it's not convenient. I know it's going to be hard. I know you have every reason to tell me to go to hell and never come back. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. Please. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, staring at the coffee in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Do you know what it was like? Being pregnant and alone in a foreign country? I went back to Paris because I couldn't stay here. Everywhere I looked, I saw you. I saw us. I saw the life we were supposed to have. I'm sorry. I was sick all the time. Morning sickness that lasted all day. I couldn't work. I couldn't afford the apartment I was renting. I had to move in with my mother in her tiny flat in Montmartre. She was already sick then, though we didn't know how sick. And I had to tell her that the man I loved, the man I'd moved to America for, had paid me to abort my pregnancy. Vivian. Do you know what she said? She said, then prove him wrong. Keep the babies, raise them, show him what he threw away. So that's what I did. She looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. I worked in a bakery until I was 8 months pregnant. I saved every penny. And when Margot and Isabel were born, when I held them for the first time, I promised them that they would never feel unwanted, that they would always know they were loved, that I would be enough for them. You are enough, Damien said. You're an incredible mother. Anyone can see that. Then why isn't that enough for you? Why do you need to be part of this? Because they're mine too. Because I want to know them. Because... He stopped, his voice breaking. Because I've spent 4 years in a glass tower, surrounded by everything money can buy, and I've never felt more empty. And then I saw them, and I felt something. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something. Vivian wiped her eyes. That's not my problem, Damien. I know. But it could be my chance. Our chance. To give them something more. They don't need more. They need stability. They need routine. They need to feel safe. And they can have all of that. I'm not trying to disrupt their lives. I just want to be part of them. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her wavering, could see the exhaustion in her face, the dark circles under her eyes, could see that she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and maybe, just maybe, she was tired of carrying it alone. One afternoon, she finally said, this Saturday, 2 hours at the park. If you're even 5 minutes late, you'll never get another chance. I'll be there, Damien promised, relief flooding through him. Thank you, Vivian. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She turned toward the bakery door. You haven't earned anything. This is for them, not for you. If you hurt them, if you disappoint them, if you prove to be the same man who wrote that check 4 years ago, I will make sure you never see them again. Do you understand? I understand. Good. She opened the door, then paused. Saturday, 2 p.m. Prospect Park, near the boathouse. Don't be late. I won't be. She disappeared into the bakery without another word, and Damien stood there on the sidewalk, holding his coffee, feeling like he'd just been given a gift he didn't deserve. A chance. One chance to prove he could be better than he'd been. One chance to know his daughters. One chance to maybe, somehow, begin to make amends for the worst mistake of his life. He wasn't going to waste it. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather. Golden sunshine filtered through trees ablaze with red and orange leaves. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and that particular quality of October that made everything feel both ending and beginning at once. Damien arrived at Prospect Park at 1:30, a full 30 minutes early, clutching two identical teddy bears and feeling more nervous than he'd ever been before any board meeting, any investor presentation, any hostile negotiation. He'd barely slept the night before, had changed his outfit 3 times that morning. What did you wear to meet your daughters for the first time? A suit seemed too formal, too much like the corporate shark he was trying not to be. Jeans and a t-shirt seemed too casual, like he wasn't taking it seriously. He'd finally settled on dark jeans and a navy sweater, trying to look approachable but put together, trying to look like someone who could be a father. The teddy bears had been another agonizing decision. He'd gone to FAO Schwartz and spent an hour walking through the aisles, overwhelmed by choices. Too big seemed like he was trying to buy their affection. Too small seemed like he didn't care enough. He'd finally chosen 2 medium-sized bears, soft and huggable, one wearing a purple dress and one wearing a blue bow tie. The saleswoman had wrapped them carefully, and Damien had carried them out like they were made of glass. Now he sat on a bench near the boathouse, watching families walk by. Fathers pushing strollers, mothers holding small hands, children running and laughing and living their lives with the easy joy of people who'd never known abandonment. Damien watched them and wondered if Margot and Isabel would ever look at him the way those children looked at their fathers, with trust, with love, with the certainty that this person would always be there. He'd given them every reason not to trust him, every reason to see him as a stranger, an intruder, someone who'd chosen his company over their existence. But he was here now. That had to count for something. It had to. At exactly 2 p.m., Vivian appeared on the path. She was holding hands with both girls, one on each side. They wore matching purple jackets that brought out the gold flecks in Margot's eyes and tiny sneakers that lit up when they walked. Their dark curls bounced as they moved, and Damien's heart clenched seeing them in daylight, seeing them clearly, seeing every detail of their faces. Margot had his nose. Isabel had his mother's chin. They both had Vivian's delicate bone structure, her graceful way of moving. They were perfect. They were his. They were strangers. When they saw him, Margot immediately hid behind Vivian's leg, peeking out with one hazel eye. Isabel stared at him openly, her gray eyes assessing him with that same serious expression she'd had at the bakery. Vivian crouched down to their level, her hands on both their shoulders. "Girls," she said gently. Speaking in English, but with her French accent wrapping around each word. "This is Monsieur Cross. He's—" She paused and Damien saw her swallow hard. "He's your papa." The word hit Damien like a physical blow. Papa. He was their papa. This was real. This was happening. Margot peeked out a little further from behind Vivian's leg. "Like Sophie's papa?" she asked in her small voice, her English carrying the same French accent as her mother's. "Yes, chérie, like Sophie's papa." Isabel stepped forward boldly, her hands on her hips in a gesture that was so like Vivian, it made Damien want to laugh and cry at the same time. "Where were you before?" she demanded. The question was so direct, so innocent, and so devastating that Damien had to swallow hard before answering. He'd prepared for this, had practiced what he would say. But now, looking into his 4-year-old daughter's eyes, all his rehearsed speeches disappeared. He could only offer the truth. "I was lost," he said honestly, his voice rough, "but I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Isabel tilted her head, considering this. "Did you bring us presents?" she asked, her eyes going to the wrapped packages beside him on the bench. Despite everything, despite the weight of the moment, Damien smiled. "I did. Is that okay?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically, and Damien felt a small spark of hope. He picked up the packages and held them out. "This one is for Margot," he said, offering the bear in the purple dress. "And this one is for Isabel, the bear with the blue bow tie." Margot emerged from behind Vivian slowly, reaching out with tentative hands to take the bear. She clutched it to her chest immediately, burying her face in its soft fur. "Mercy," she whispered. Isabel took hers with more confidence, holding it up to examine it critically. "What's his name?" she asked. "He doesn't have one yet," Damien said. "I thought maybe you could name him." Isabel's face lit up. "Really? Really? Then his name is Monsieur Blueberry, because of his bow tie." Damien laughed, and it felt good, felt real. Monsieur Blueberry is a perfect name. "What about yours?" Isabel asked Margot. "What are you going to name her?" Margot looked up at Damien shyly. "Can I name her anything?" "Anything you want." "Then, Marguerite, like grand-mère." Damien's breath caught. Marguerite had been his mother's name. The bakery was named Sweet Marguerite, and now his daughter, who'd never met his mother, had chosen that name. It felt like a sign, like maybe somehow this was meant to be. "That's a beautiful name," he said softly. "Your grand-mère would have loved that." "Did you know grand-mère?" Margot asked. "No, but I knew another Marguerite, my mother. She would have loved you both very much." Vivian made a small sound, and when Damien looked at her, he saw tears in her eyes. She wiped them quickly, standing up. 2 hours, she said quietly. "I'll be at the cafe over there. If they need me, if anything happens." "I'll take care of them," Damien promised. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see all the fear and hope and anger and exhaustion in her face. "I know," she finally said. "That's what scares me." Then she walked away, and Damien was alone with his daughters for the first time in their lives. For a moment, nobody moved. The girls stood there holding their bears, looking at him expectantly. Damien realized they were waiting for him to lead, to know what to do, to be the adult. He was their father. He was supposed to know how this worked. He had no idea how this worked. "So," he said, trying to sound confident, "what do you girls like to do at the park?" "The playground," Isabel said immediately. "I can climb to the very top of the big slide. Margot is scared, but I'm not scared of anything." "I'm not scared," Margot protested. "I just don't like being so high." "That's okay," Damien said. "Everyone has different things they like. Should we go to the playground?" Both girls nodded, and they started walking. Isabel ran ahead, her light-up sneakers flashing with each step. Margot walked more slowly, staying close to Damien but not quite touching him. He adjusted his pace to match hers, and they walked in silence for a moment. "Do you really live in a tower that touches the clouds?" Margot asked suddenly. Damien glanced down at her, surprised. "Your maman told you that?" "She said you live very high up, that you can see the whole city." "That's true. I live on the 47th floor." Margot's eyes went wide. "That's so high. Aren't you scared?" "Sometimes," Damien admitted. "But the view is beautiful. You can see all of Central Park and the buildings, and at night all the lights look like stars." "I would like to see that," Margot said softly. "Maybe someday you can," Damien offered, then immediately worried he'd overstepped. "If your maman says it's okay." They reached the playground, and Isabel was already climbing the jungle gym with fearless determination. "Watch me, Papa," she called out, and Damien's heart stopped at the word. "Papa." She'd called him Papa. "I'm watching." He called back, moving closer to spot her, even though she clearly didn't need help. She climbed like a little monkey, fearless and fast, reaching the top platform and throwing her arms up in victory. "Did you see? Did you see how fast I was?" "I saw." "You're an excellent climber." "I know. Now watch me go down the slide." She whooshed down the tall spiral slide, laughing the whole way, and Damien found himself laughing too. Her joy was infectious. Her confidence was remarkable. She was 4 years old and already so completely herself. Margot tugged on his sleeve. "Can you push me on the swings?" "Of course." They walked to the swing set, and Damien helped Margot climb onto one of the swings, making sure she was holding on tight before giving her a gentle push. "Higher," she said. He pushed a little harder. "Higher. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "I like flying." So Damien pushed higher, and Margot laughed, her head tilted back, her curls streaming behind her. I'm flying, Papa. Look, I'm flying. And there it was again. Papa. Both his daughters had called him Papa, and Damien felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 4 years, something that felt dangerously like hope. They spent the next hour and a half in constant motion. Isabel demanded he watch her climb the jungle gym at least 20 times, each ascent apparently more impressive than the last. Margot wanted to swing, then play in the sandbox, then swing again. They showed him how they could hang from the monkey bars, how they could go down the slide backwards, how they could pump their legs on the swings almost by themselves. Damien watched and encouraged and caught them when they jumped and felt more present, more alive than he had in years. This was what he'd been missing. This was what mattered, not board meetings or profit margins or stock prices. This. These 2 little girls with their light-up sneakers and their teddy bears and their absolute certainty that the world was good and safe and full of possibility. Around 3:30, both girls started to slow down. Isabel's climbing became less enthusiastic. Margot asked to sit on the bench. Damien realized they were getting tired, and he'd promised Vivian 2 hours. Their time was almost up. "Are you girls hungry?" he asked. "Would you like some ice cream?" Both faces lit up. "Maman doesn't usually let us have ice cream," Isabel said. "Well, maybe just this once," Damien said, "if we ask her nicely." They walked to the cafe where Vivian was waiting. She was sitting at an outdoor table with a cup of coffee and a book, but Damien could tell she hadn't been reading. The book was open to the same page it had been when he'd glanced over an hour ago. She'd been watching them, making sure they were safe, making sure he didn't disappoint them. When she saw them approaching, she closed the book and stood. Her eyes scanned both girls quickly, checking for injuries, for tears, for any sign that this had been a mistake. "Maman," Isabel called out, running ahead. "Papa wants to buy us ice cream. Can we have ice cream? Please?" Vivian's eyes met Damien's over Isabel's head. He gave a small shrug, a half-smile. She sighed. "Just this once," she said, "but only 1 scoop." Both girls cheered and ran to look at the ice cream cart nearby. Vivian walked over to Damien, her arms crossed. "They seem happy," she said quietly. "They're amazing," Damien replied. "Both of them. Vivian, they're absolutely amazing." "I know. Isabel is fearless. She climbed everything. And Margot, she's so thoughtful, so observant. She named her bear Marguerite." "I heard." Vivian's voice was soft. "That was my mother's name too, I know." Damien looked at her. "Thank you for this, for giving me this chance." "Don't thank me yet." This was 2 hours. Being a parent is every day, every night, every tantrum and every fever and every time they wake up scared at 3 in the morning. It's not just playground visits and ice cream. "I know, but I want to learn. I want to be there for all of it." Vivian studied his face. "We'll see," she said finally. "If you're serious, if you really want to be part of their lives, then next Saturday. Same time. Thank you. And Damien." Her voice stopped him as he started to turn toward the girls. "Don't make promises you can't keep. They're already starting to trust you. If you break that trust, if you disappear again, it will hurt them. And I won't forgive you for that. I won't disappear," Damien promised. "I'm here. I'm staying." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll see." They got ice cream. Chocolate for Isabel, strawberry for Margot. The girls sat on a bench with Vivian, their bears beside them, licking their cones with serious concentration. Damien sat across from them, watching, memorizing every detail. The way Margot's nose wrinkled when she got brain freeze, the way Isabel got ice cream all over her face and didn't care, the way Vivian gently wiped their faces with napkins. Her touch so tender it made Damien's chest ache. This was a family, his family, and he'd almost destroyed it before it even began. When the ice cream was finished and the girls' hands were cleaned, Vivian stood. "Time to go," she said. "Say goodbye to your papa." "Goodbye, Papa," Margot said shyly, giving him a quick hug that lasted maybe 2 seconds but felt like everything. "Bye, Papa," Isabel said, hugging him harder. "Thank you for Monsieur Blueberry. You're welcome. Thank you for letting me spend time with you." "Will you come again?" Margot asked. "If your maman says yes, I would love to come again." Next Saturday, Vivian said quietly. Same time. Damien watched them walk away, Vivian holding both girls' hands, the three of them talking in French as they disappeared down the path. He sat on the bench long after they were gone, feeling the ghost of Margot's brief hug, hearing Isabel's laughter echo in his memory. He'd been given a second chance. He wasn't going to waste it. The Saturdays became routine. Every week Damien showed up at Prospect Park at exactly 2 p.m. Every week the girls were a little less shy, a little more comfortable. By the third Saturday, Margot held his hand without hesitation. By the fourth, Isabel demanded piggyback rides. By the fifth, they were calling him Papa like they'd been doing it their whole lives. Damien learned their rhythms, learned that Margot loved stories and would sit for hours listening to him read, learned that Isabel was fearless physically but scared of dogs, learned that they both adored their mother with a fierce devotion that made his chest ache with guilt and gratitude. Vivian had raised them alone, had been both mother and father, had given them everything they needed to be happy, confident, loved, and slowly, carefully, she was letting him in. After the sixth Saturday, Vivian suggested Wednesday afternoons too. Just for an hour, she said, I have to do inventory at the bakery and my babysitter canceled, if you're available. I'm available, Damien said immediately. I'll always be available. So Wednesday afternoons were added. Damien would pick the girls up from preschool, take them to the park or the library, or sometimes just back to the bakery where they would sit in the kitchen and color while Vivian worked. Those afternoons were quieter than the Saturdays, more domestic, more real. One Wednesday in November, Margot fell asleep on his lap while he was reading to her, just dozed off mid-story, her head heavy against his chest, her breathing deep and even. Damien sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. This little girl trusted him enough to fall asleep on him, trusted him to keep her safe, trusted him to be there when she woke up. Vivian came out of the kitchen and stopped when she saw them, her face softened in a way Damien hadn't seen in years. She looks comfortable, she said quietly. She fell asleep during The Very Hungry Caterpillar. That's her favorite book. Vivian sat down beside them. She's been sleeping better lately. I think having you around has been good for her. For both of them. And you? Damien asked. Has it been good for you? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. It's been complicated, she finally said. Watching you with them, seeing you try so hard, it makes me remember why I fell in love with you. And it makes me angry all over again for what you did. I understand. Do you? Because, Damien, I spent 4 years hating you. 4 years telling myself that we were better off without you, that you were cold and selfish and incapable of love. And now you're here, and you're good with them, and it's confusing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back those 4 years. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I was alone and terrified, and you were the one who made me that way. You're right. Nothing I do can change that. But Vivian, I'm trying. I'm trying to be the man I should have been, the father they deserve. He stopped, not sure if he had the right to finish that sentence. The what? She prompted. The partner you deserved, he said quietly. I know I have no right to even think about that. I know what we had is gone, but I want you to know that I see you. I see how incredible you are. How strong, how you've built this life for them despite everything. You're remarkable. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Don't, she whispered. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because it makes me hope. And I can't afford to hope. Not with you. Not again. Before Damien could respond, Isabel came running out of the kitchen covered in flour. Maman, I made a cake, she announced proudly. Well, I made a mess, but it's a cake mess. Vivian laughed, wiping her eyes quickly. Let's go clean you up, ma chérie. She took Isabel's hand and led her toward the bathroom, leaving Damien sitting with Margot still asleep on his lap. He looked down at his daughter's peaceful face and made a silent promise. He would earn Vivian's hope. However long it took, however hard it was, he would prove that he'd changed, that he was worth a second chance, not just for the girls, for all of them. Winter arrived with the first snow in early December. Damien had been part of the girls' lives for 2 months now, and the change in him was profound. He'd started leaving work at 5 instead of 8, had turned down a speaking engagement in London because it conflicted with a Wednesday afternoon. Had his assistant block out every Saturday as unavailable, no exceptions. His board had noticed. His CFO had asked if everything was all right. Damien had simply said he was reprioritizing and left it at that. He didn't owe them an explanation. Didn't owe anyone an explanation except Vivian and the girls. The bakery was struggling. Damien could see it even though Vivian tried to hide it. The equipment was old and breaking down. The foot traffic was inconsistent. And then, in mid-December, disaster struck. The building's landlord sold to developers who wanted to tear down the whole block and build luxury condos. Vivian had 60 days to vacate. Damien found out on a Wednesday when he arrived to pick up the girls and found Vivian sitting in the kitchen with her head in her hands, an eviction notice on the table in front of her. The girls were at a friend's house for a play date. It was just Vivian, alone, and she was crying. "Vivian," he said softly, and she looked up, quickly wiping her eyes. "I didn't hear you come in." "What happened?" She gestured at the notice. "They're tearing down the building. I have 60 days. I'm so sorry. I can't afford another space, not in this neighborhood." "Not anywhere in Brooklyn that would have enough foot traffic." She laughed bitterly. "I should have known this was too good to be true. I finally get the bakery running, finally start to build a customer base, and this isn't your fault, isn't it?" "Maybe I'm cursed. Maybe I'm not supposed to have good things. Don't say that." Damien sat down across from her. "You're one of the most talented people I've ever met. This bakery is incredible. You just need money?" She looked at him sharply. "Is that what you were going to say? That I just need money?" "I was going to say you need a break, some good luck, a landlord who isn't a greedy bastard, but money would solve it, wouldn't it? Money always solves everything for people like you. That's not fair, isn't it?" Vivian stood up, pacing. "You live in your tower, and you throw money at problems, and they disappear. But some of us don't have that luxury. Some of us have to actually struggle. I know that. Do you? Because, Damien, you paid me $200,000 to make your problem disappear. And now here you are, and I'm sure you're thinking you could just write another check and fix this too." The words hit like a slap. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm just looking for problems to throw money at? Aren't you?" "No." Damien stood too, facing her. "I'm looking at the mother of my children, someone I care about, someone who's struggling, and I want to help. That's what people who care about each other do. They help. We're not people who care about each other. We're people who share children, that's all." "Is it?" "Because, Vivian, I think we both know that's not true." She stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes bright with tears and anger. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't do this. Don't do what? Don't tell you that I still love you, that I never stopped, that watching you with our daughters, seeing the incredible mother you are, seeing how strong and talented and beautiful you are, has only made me love you more? Stop. I can't. I've tried. For 4 years I tried to forget you, to move on, to convince myself that what we had wasn't real. But it was real, Vivian. It was the most real thing in my life, and I destroyed it because I was a coward. You're right. You were a coward, and I was a fool for loving you." "Was?" Damien took a step closer. "Past tense?" Vivian turned away. "I can't do this right now. I have to figure out what to do about the bakery, about our apartment lease that's ending next month, about how I'm going to keep a roof over my daughters' heads. Move in with me." The words were out before Damien could stop them. Vivian spun around, staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "What?" "Move in with me. Into my penthouse. I have 4 bedrooms sitting empty. The girls could each have their own room, or share if they prefer. There's a doorman, security, a gym, a pool. Are you insane? I'm serious. Vivian, you need a place to live. I have space. Let me help. I can't accept that. Why not? I'm their father. Let me provide for them, for you, because it feels like I'm taking your money again." Vivian's voice rose. "Like I'm that desperate woman who signed away her dignity for a check. You were never that woman, Damien said fiercely. You were a woman I failed, a woman I hurt. A woman who took the only option I gave her and then made her own choice anyway. You kept our daughters, Vivian. You raised them. You gave them everything. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Then why does it feel like I'm selling out? Like I'm letting you buy your way back into our lives? Because you're proud. Because you've had to do everything alone for so long that accepting help feels like weakness. But it's not. It's not weakness to let someone who cares about you help when you need it. Someone who cares about me? She laughed bitterly. You paid me to abort our children, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Vivian, I'm here now. I'm showing up. I'm trying, and I'm asking you to let me help. Not as payment, not as charity, as family. The word hung between them. Family. Vivian sank back into her chair, her face in her hands. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I'm so tired, Damien. I'm so tired of struggling, of trying to do everything alone, of being strong all the time. Then don't be. Let me help carry some of the weight. She looked up at him, and he could see the war raging behind her eyes, pride versus exhaustion, anger versus the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do this alone anymore. Separate bedrooms, she finally said. Clear boundaries. This is for the girls, not us. Whatever you need, Damien agreed, even though his heart was racing with hope. Whatever makes you comfortable. And if it doesn't work, if it's too weird or too hard, we find another solution. You don't get to hold this over me. I would never. And you don't get to just throw money at every problem. I'm not a charity case. I know that. And the girls. They can't think this means we're together. We're not together. We're just co-parenting. Co-parenting, Damien agreed, even though the word felt inadequate for what he hoped they could become. Vivian took a deep breath. Okay, we'll try it. But Damien, if you hurt them, if you hurt me again, I will take them, and you will never find us. Do you understand? I understand. And I promise, Vivian, I won't hurt you again. Any of you. She nodded slowly. When? Whenever you're ready. This weekend? Next week? Next week? After Christmas, I want them to have one more Christmas in our apartment. One more Christmas that's just ours. Of course. Damien left the bakery that evening feeling like he'd been given another gift he didn't deserve. Vivian and the girls were going to move in with him. They were going to be under his roof, in his space, part of his daily life. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was more than he'd dared to hope for. Christmas came, and Damien spent it alone in his penthouse as he had for the past 4 years. But this year was different. This year, he knew that next Christmas he would have his daughters, would have Vivian, would have a family. He'd bought presents for the girls, had them wrapped and ready to give them when they moved in. Books for Margot, who loved stories. Art supplies for Isabel, who loved creating. And for Vivian, he'd bought nothing. Because he knew she wouldn't accept anything expensive, and anything cheap would feel insulting. So instead, he had spent the week preparing the penthouse. He'd converted one of the guest rooms into a bedroom for the girls. Had it painted a soft lavender color, had bought twin beds with matching purple comforters, had filled a bookshelf with children's books and a toy chest with carefully selected toys, had made sure there were nightlights and soft rugs and everything he could think of to make them feel safe and comfortable. Another bedroom he'd prepared for Vivian, had made sure it had its own bathroom, its own space, had put fresh flowers on the dresser and new linens on the bed, had tried to make it feel welcoming without being presumptuous. His housekeeper had looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Mr. Cross, are you? Are you having guests? Family, he'd corrected. I'm having family. On December 28th, a moving truck pulled up outside his building. Damien met them in the lobby, his heart pounding. Vivian emerged from a taxi with both girls, and they stared up at his building with wide eyes. You really do live in a tower, Margot whispered. I told you, Damien said, smiling. Come on, let me show you your new home. The elevator ride up was silent, except for Isabel counting the floors. 30, 40, 45, 46, 47. We're so high, Mama. I know, Cherie. The elevator doors opened directly into Damien's penthouse, and all three of them stepped out into the marble foyer. The space was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread out below them. The furniture was all sleek and modern and expensive. It looked like a showroom. It looked nothing like a home. Vivian's face was unreadable. It's very nice. Let me show you your rooms," Damien said quickly. "Girls, come see." He led them down the hall to the lavender room, and both girls gasped when they saw it. Their own beds, their own bookshelf, their own toy chest. Isabel ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass. "I can see everything," she breathed. Margot was more cautious, walking slowly around the room, touching things gently. "Is this really ours?" she asked. "Really yours," Damien confirmed. "Do you like it?" "I love it," Margot whispered. "Me too," Isabel called from the window. "Maman, come see. You can see the whole park." Vivian walked to the window, and Damien saw her blink back tears. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Thank you, Damien." "Your room is next door," he said. "Let me show you." He led her to the room he'd prepared, and Vivian stood in the doorway, taking it in. The soft gray walls, the comfortable bed. The flowers on the dresser, the door to the private bathroom. It was elegant but not ostentatious, comfortable but not presumptuous. "This is too much," she said. "It's just a room." "Damien," she turned to face him, "this is your home. We're invading your space. I don't want you to feel like you have to change everything for us. I want to change everything for you. This place has been a mausoleum for 4 years. You're bringing life into it. That's not an invasion. That's a gift." She studied his face for a long moment. "Okay," she finally said. "Okay, we'll try this." The first few days were awkward. Vivian and the girls tiptoed around like they were guests in a museum. Damien tried to make them comfortable, but he didn't know how. His penthouse had never been designed for children. Everything was glass and marble and sharp edges. Everything was breakable. On the third day, Isabel knocked over a vase. It shattered on the marble floor, and she burst into tears. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Damien rushed over, carefully picking her up and carrying her away from the broken glass. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just a vase. Are you hurt?" "No, but Maman is going to be so mad." "I'm not mad," Vivian said, appearing from the kitchen. "Accidents happen." "But it was expensive," Isabel sobbed. "It was just a thing," Damien said firmly. "Things can be replaced. You can't. You're much more important than any vase." Isabel looked at him with her tear-stained face. "Really?" "Really." She hugged him tight, and Damien held her, feeling her small body shake with leftover sobs. Over her head, his eyes met Vivian's. She was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Something soft, something that looked almost like the way she used to look at him before everything fell apart. After that, things got easier. The girls stopped tiptoeing, started running through the halls, started leaving toys scattered across the living room floor, started making the penthouse feel lived in, feel like a home. Damien learned the rhythm of family life, learned that breakfast was chaos, with Isabel demanding pancakes and Margot wanting cereal and Vivian trying to make sure they ate something healthy. Learned that bedtime was a negotiation, with both girls wanting just one more story, just 5 more minutes, just one more glass of water. Learned that Vivian sang French lullabies when she thought no one was listening, her voice soft and sweet and achingly beautiful. He learned that she still took her coffee with too much sugar, that she looked most beautiful in the morning with flour in her hair from baking, that she had a small scar on her left hand from a kitchen accident in Paris, that she still hummed when she was concentrating, that she still bit her lip when she was worried. He learned that he was still completely in love with her, but he kept his distance, kept to their agreement, separate bedrooms, clear boundaries. He was there for the girls and he was respectful to Vivian, and he didn't push for more, even though he wanted to, even though every time she smiled at him, every time she laughed at one of his jokes, every time their hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same thing, he wanted to pull her into his arms and never let go. But he'd hurt her once. He wouldn't risk hurting her again by pushing too hard, too fast. January turned into February. The girls started calling the penthouse home, started inviting friends over for playdates, started treating Damien like he'd always been there. and slowly, carefully, the walls between him and Vivian began to crumble. It started with small things, hands brushing as they both reached for the same toy to pick up, lingering glances across the dinner table, shared smiles over the girls' antics, inside jokes developing, the comfort of routine together. One evening in late February, after the girls were asleep, Vivian came out of her room to find Damien sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, staring out at the city lights. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking?" "About what?" "About how different everything is now, how much better." Vivian poured herself a glass of wine and sat down beside him. Not too close, but closer than she would have a month ago. "It is different," she agreed. "The girls are happy here. They love having you around all the time." "And you?" Damien asked. "Are you happy here?" She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not unhappy. It's been an adjustment. But Damien, you've been good to us. Patient, kind. You've really stepped up. I'm trying, I know, and I see it. The girls see it too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their wine, watching the city lights. Then Vivian spoke again, her voice soft. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you really panic? When I told you I was pregnant, was it really just about the company?" Damien took a deep breath. "No, I mean, yes, the company was part of it, but mostly." He paused, trying to find the words. "I was terrified. My father was cold and distant. He saw me as an heir, not a son. He taught me that emotion was weakness, that attachment was liability. And I believed him. I built my whole life around that philosophy. And then you told me you were pregnant, and I realized I was going to be a father, and I was terrified I would be like him, that I would fail, that I would hurt my child the way he hurt me. So you pushed us away. So I pushed you away. Because I thought that was safer. I thought if I wasn't there, I couldn't fail, couldn't hurt anyone. But I was wrong. I hurt you anyway. Hurt them. Hurt myself." Vivian was quiet. "I wish you had told me that then. I wish I had too. But I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be vulnerable, how to admit I was scared. My father taught me that admitting fear was the same as admitting defeat. Your father sounds like he was a terrible parent. He was, and I was so determined not to be like him that I became exactly like him. Cold, controlling, putting business before family. But you're not like that now. I'm trying not to be. Every day I'm trying to be different, to be better, to be the father Margot and Isabel deserve." "You're doing a good job," Vivian said softly. "They adore you." "And you?" Damien turned to look at her. "Do you? Can you ever forgive me?" Vivian met his eyes, and he saw so much in her gaze. Pain, anger, but also something else, something that looked like hope. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to. Part of me sees how hard you're trying, how much you've changed, and thinks maybe we could try again. But part of me is still so angry, still so hurt, still so scared that you'll revert to who you were, that you'll choose your company over us again. I won't. I swear to you, Vivian, I won't. You can't promise that. You can't know what you'll do when things get hard. You're right. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll try. Every single day, I'll choose you and the girls. I'll choose family over everything else." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I want to believe you. Then believe me. Give me a chance to prove it." She was quiet for a long moment, and Damien held his breath. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Slowly," she said. "We'll take this slowly, as slow as you need. And if you hurt me again, I won't. I promise, Vivian. I won't." She squeezed his hand, and they sat there together, holding hands, watching the city lights, and Damien felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. He felt whole. March arrived with the first hints of spring. The girls turned 5, and they had a birthday party in the penthouse with their preschool friends. Damien and Vivian worked together to plan it, and it felt natural, felt right, felt like they were a team. The party was chaos. 25-year-olds running through the penthouse playing games, eating cake, screaming with joy. Damien's pristine showroom became a disaster zone of streamers and balloons and spilled juice, and he loved every second of it. At one point, he found Vivian in the kitchen, frosting cupcakes. She had flour in her hair and frosting on her nose, and she was humming to herself. Damien walked up behind her, and without thinking, reached out to wipe the frosting off her nose. She turned, surprised, and they were suddenly very close. Close enough that Damien could see the gold flecks in her gray eyes. Close enough that he could smell her perfume, that same jasmine scent she'd always worn. Close enough to kiss. "You had frosting," he said softly. "Thank you." They stood there for a moment, neither moving. Then Isabel ran into the kitchen demanding more juice, and the moment broke. But Damien saw the flush in Vivian's cheeks, saw the way her breath had quickened, saw that she'd felt it too. That night, after all the guests had left and the girls were asleep and the penthouse was cleaned up, Vivian knocked on Damien's bedroom door. "Come in," he called. She opened the door slowly. "I just wanted to say thank you. For today. For the party. The girls had the best time. I had the best time," Damien said honestly. "This was the best birthday I've ever been part of." Vivian smiled. "They love you so much. Both of them. You're a good father, Damien. I'm trying to be. You are." She paused, then took a step into the room. "And I think I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "To try. To really try. With us?" Damien's heart stopped. "Vivian, are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "I'm terrified. But I'm also tired of being angry. Tired of holding on to the past. And Damien, when I watch you with the girls, when I see how hard you're trying, how much you've changed, I remember why I fell in love with you. And I think maybe I never stopped. I never stopped loving you," Damien said, standing up and walking toward her. "Not for a single day. I know, I can see it. In the way you look at me, in the way you've been so patient, so respectful, so—" She trailed off. And Damien closed the distance between them. "So what?" he prompted softly. "So perfect," she whispered, and then she kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid it might break. But then Vivian's hands came up to cup his face, and Damien's arms wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened. 4 years of longing and regret and love poured into that kiss. 4 years of missing each other. 4 years of hoping for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "This doesn't fix everything," she said. "We still have a lot to work through. I know, and I'm still scared. I know. But Vivian, I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me, that I've changed, that I'll choose you and our family every single day." "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She stayed in his room that night. They didn't do anything except hold each other, talking until dawn about everything they'd been through, about the pain and the anger and the hope, about their dreams for the future, about how they would make this work. And when the sun rose over the city, Damien held Vivian in his arms and felt like he'd finally come home. The next few months were a revelation. Damien and Vivian navigated their new relationship carefully, mindfully, always putting the girls first. They didn't want to confuse them or move too fast. But slowly, the girls started to notice that Maman and Papa were spending more time together, were smiling more, were happy. One morning in April, Margot climbed into bed between them. "Are you and Papa together now?" she asked Vivian. Vivian glanced at Damien, then back at Margot. "Yes, chérie. We are. Is that okay?" Margot nodded seriously. "I like it when you're happy, Maman. And Papa makes you happy." "He does," Vivian agreed, reaching over to squeeze Damien's hand. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Isabel asked, appearing in the doorway. "We've always been a real family," Damien said. "But yes, we're together. All of us." Both girls cheered and jumped on the bed, and the 4 of them dissolved into laughter and tickle fights and the kind of joy that Damien had never known was possible. In May, Vivian reopened her bakery. Damien had found her a perfect space in a busy neighborhood with lots of foot traffic. He'd offered to buy it for her, but she'd refused. So instead, he'd co-signed the lease and helped her get a business loan. The bakery was hers, her dream, her success. He was just there to support her. The grand opening was a huge success. The girls helped, wearing matching aprons and handing out samples. Damien worked the register, completely out of his element, but loving every minute. And Vivian glowed in her element, doing what she loved. That night, after the girls were asleep, Vivian found Damien on the balcony. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for believing in me, for supporting my dream." "It's not just your dream," Damien said. "It's our dream. Your success is our success. I'm so proud of you, Vivian." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much. I love you too." I never stopped. On Vivian's birthday in June, Damien proposed, not with a massive diamond or a grand gesture, just with his mother's simple gold band and a promise. They were in the penthouse, the girls asleep, the city lights twinkling below them. "Vivian Laurent," he said, getting down on one knee. "4 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let you go. I let fear and pride and my father's poison destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. But you gave me a second chance. You let me back into your life, into our daughters' lives. You let me prove that I could change, that I could be better. And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life choosing you, choosing our family, choosing love over everything else. Will you marry me?" Vivian was crying, her hands over her mouth. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Damien. Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and she pulled him up to kiss him. They held each other as the city sparkled below them, and Damien felt a peace he'd never known. This was right. This was real. This was forever. They married quietly in August, in the penthouse with only the twins present. Both girls served as flower girls, wearing matching lavender dresses that made them look like little princesses. Margot cried happy tears during the vows. Isabel declared it the best party ever and demanded cake for breakfast the next morning. The vows they wrote themselves were honest and raw and hopeful. Damien promised to always choose family over work, to always be present, to always show up. Vivian promised to trust him, to let him in, to build a future together instead of dwelling on the past. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, both girls cheered. The four of them hugged, a tangle of arms and laughter and love, and Damien thought, This is what I was missing. This is what matters." Fall arrived with golden leaves and crisp air. The bakery was thriving. The girls started kindergarten. Damien had stepped back from some of his responsibilities at the company, promoting his COO and delegating more. He still worked, still ran his empire, but it was no longer his entire life. His family was his life now. One Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after he'd seen them through the bakery window, Damien took his family back to Prospect Park. They walked to the same playground where he'd spent that first nervous afternoon with the girls, where Margot had asked him to push her on the swings, where Isabel had demanded he watch her climb, where he'd first heard them call him Papa. The girls ran ahead to the playground, and Damien and Vivian sat on a bench watching them play. Margot was reading a book to her bear, Marguerite. Isabel was climbing the jungle gym with the same fearless determination she'd had a year ago. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivian asked quietly. "The years we lost?" "Every day," Damien admitted, "but I'm grateful for every moment we have now. And I promise, Vivian, I'll never take a single day for granted again." She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "I'm glad you found us," she said. "I'm glad you didn't give up. I'll never give up on us, on this, on our family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughters play. Then Isabel called out, "Papa, watch me. I can climb even higher now." "I'm watching, sweetheart," Damien called back. And he was. He was watching and present and there, not thinking about work or deals or profit margins, just watching his daughter climb, his other daughter Red, his wife lean against him, just being part of this moment, this life, this family. Later that evening, after the girls were asleep, Damien stood in their bedroom doorway, watching them. Margot was curled up with Marguerite the bear. Isabel was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off, Monsieur Blueberry clutched in one hand. They looked so peaceful, so loved, so safe. Vivian came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. They're beautiful, aren't they? They're perfect. You did an amazing job raising them, Vivian. We're raising them now, together. Together, Damien agreed. They stood there for a moment, watching their daughter sleep. Then Vivian pulled him away, closing the door softly. Come to bed, she said. Tomorrow's another day. And Damien followed her, grateful for tomorrow. Grateful for every tomorrow he would get with this family, this life, this love. He had paid $200,000 to avoid fatherhood, but standing here now, he realized the real price had been 4 years of his daughter's lives, 4 years of Vivian's love, 4 years of the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Some mistakes could never be fully erased. The pain he'd caused, the years they'd lost, the trust he'd broken, those scars would always be there. But with patience and humility and unwavering commitment, those mistakes could be transformed into something beautiful. A second chance neither of them had thought possible. A future they would build together, one precious day at a time. Damien had learned what his father never understood. That control was nothing compared to connection. That wealth meant nothing without love. That the only empire worth building was the one made of family, forgiveness, and the daily choice to show up, to be present, to choose love over everything else. He'd spent 34 years measuring worth in numbers, but now he knew. The only number that mattered was 4. 2 daughters, 1 wife, 1 family. Everything else was just noise. As he climbed into bed beside Vivian, as she curled into his arms, as he listened to the quiet sounds of his daughters sleeping down the hall, Damien finally understood what it meant to be rich, not in money or power or success, but in love, in family, in the precious, irreplaceable gift of being chosen, being forgiven, being given a second chance to get it right. And this time, he wouldn't waste it. This time, he would show up every single day. Would choose love over fear, would choose family over everything, would be the father his daughters deserved and the husband Vivian had always needed. This time, he would get it right, because some things were worth more than any amount of money. Some things couldn't be bought or sold or negotiated. Some things could only be earned through patience and presence and the daily choice to be better than you were yesterday. Love was one of those things. Family was one of those things. And Damien Cross, Billionaire CEO, had finally learned that lesson. Had finally understood that the greatest success wasn't measured in dollars or deals. It was measured in moments, in laughter around the dinner table, in bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, in the way his daughters' faces lit up when he came home. In the way Vivian smiled at him like he was her whole world. That was success. That was wealth. That was everything. And as Damien drifted off to sleep, holding his wife, listening to his daughters breathe, he felt something he'd never felt before. He felt complete. He felt whole. He felt like he'd finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. He felt like he'd finally come home.